Hello, everyone. You are watching Passion Project, and I'm your host, Kat Margulis. And today's guest is Léonicka Valcius. She is a literary agent with Transatlantic Agency, and Léonicka represents commercial and genre fiction for adults and children, and is the founder of #DiverseCanLit and the former chair of the Festival of Literary Diversity. I am so excited to ask Léonicka all our burning questions about fiction and submitting. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for inviting me. This is so much fun.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I'm so excited because it is, as a new writer and as somebody who wants to be published and be on bookshelves, have her book on bookshelves, it is like the number one burning question is how to get representation. How do I get on those bookshelves, seeing the agent as the gatekeeper for that? And so, yeah, it's just like, I remember, early on in my process, blogging like crazy, like reading blogs like crazy, trying to get all the information that I could. And I said I was going to start somewhere else, but I'm going to totally jump off because something just occurred to me, which is the thing that blows my mind is as writers, we're so hungry for agents. And yet I noticed that you guys work so hard getting yourselves out there too, right? Mm-hmm. Like you guys are hungry for writers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think like one of the most important things I try to tell writers is like, don't forget that you are the industry, right? I teach this to my students. I used to teach at the Centennial Book and Magazine Publishing Program. And what I would do is I was like, this is the writer and the work that they produce. And this is the reader and the all of their capacity to read. And then in the middle is the publishing industry. We need to make sure none of it depends on us. Our only job is to connect the writer to the reader. So without the writer, there is no job for us, right? So yes, we are hungry and desperate to find that great gem, that great book that we can push to people. Like I'm a book lover first and foremost, and I came into this industry because I'm like, who are these wacky minds that come up with these things, and how can I just be in their presence? And so I started off in sales at a publishing house, but I was still too far away from the wacky minds. And that's how I got into agenting, because I was like, I want to sell still. I want to be in their aura. How can I do that? And that's how I came into agenting, so that I'm still doing a sales function, but I get to just play in the imagination of brilliant people like yourself.
That remains to be seen. But thank you for that. And I'm curious, like how, I don't know, I'm going to places I didn't think I was going to go, but how much, like how, I guess the ratio of you seeking out writers and writers seeking you out, like, do you find that most of the people that you end up signing are people that you found, boots on the street sort of thing? Or were they just the people that came to you and that you attracted? Like, is it like 50-50, or how does that play out?
I think it depends for every agent. It really depends. I think, for example, I would say like the Twitter pitch contests and writers conferences are more boots on the ground, because I'm going out, I'm seeking people, I'm trying to talk to them, learn more about their work, and then encouraging them to please send me your stuff. And so I've done that and I enjoy it. But I also really value the query process, because I feel like it's the not fairest, but most accessible way. Like, hey, anybody can send me their work if they think it's a good fit based on what I say I'm looking for. So I would never want to shut that down. I will admit that I want to do more outreach. That's a goal of mine. And it's a little bit tricky because I primarily work on fiction. And so if you're wanting to do outreach to find people who are writing fiction, the only way to find them is if they're started published already in a way.
Oh, that's an
Right?
interesting catch-22. I never thought of
Yes,
that.
because like for nonfiction, like you could be like, ooh, this person is like has a really cool Instagram and
Yeah.
like they're a great performer or something, or they have a really great blog or a really great YouTube channel or podcast. But
Yeah.
for fiction, the only way to find a fiction writer's writing is they're publishing it in some way, even if it's
Right.
self-publishing or Wattpad or posting it on their blogs.
Yeah.
And that's tricky
Yeah.
because like sometimes I've encountered great writing that's just not for me.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that their next piece wouldn't be for me. So do I follow that, keep reading that person's stuff until they write something? Like it's harder.
Yeah.
But what I would love to do long term is read more literary magazines. I know lots of agents pay very close attention to what's going on in short form and read great essay pieces or short stories and find writers that way. So that's a goal I'm setting for myself.
Have you decided to work with somebody based on self-published work? Like I have this story that if, I either early on chose I would like to have an agent or I would like to just take a risk and self-publish. But if I self-publish, I'm burning bridges. Like nobody, no publisher, no agent will ever work with me if I self-publish.
That is not true. They're just different paths.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean you can't do both paths.
Yeah.
It just means you have to be really great at both. And it's a different skill set, right? Because remember I said, this is the writer, this is the reader, publishing is in the middle.
Yes.
All the functions of publishing need to happen. They must happen. The difference between traditional publishing and self-publishing is who does those functions, right? And so just because you're a brilliant writer doesn't necessarily mean you're a great cover designer or marketer or publicist. And that has to happen.
Yeah.
So it takes us a very business-minded type of person to essentially write their creative book, which is difficult and takes its own time and energy, and then also decide I'm going to launch a business and put this product out into the world and do all the marketing, sales functions in order to make it successful. Those are sometimes different skill sets, and they don't always exist in the same human. Sometimes they do, and it's amazing. Sometimes they don't, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So how I like to say it is, finding the path to publishing is always about figuring out what you do best, like what you have the time, energy, and skill set to do. And then the things that you don't have the time, energy, and skill set to do, finding partners to help you with those.
Yeah.
And in a way, looking for an agent is that first step of finding a partner, right? The skill set that agents bring is the contacts, resources, market knowledge to connect a writer to publishers.
Yeah. And so, and just out of curiosity, if somebody were to self-publish and you loved it, you're like, has that ever happened where you're like, I would like to work with you, but it would obviously be the next book, or you would be working with that existing book and seeing what else you could create with it?
Well, it depends. It hasn't happened to me, but I'm also relatively new in my career and still building my list. I do know of writers who are self-publishing who, whenever they say, I don't know, maybe I should try traditionally, I kind of poke my head up and say, hi, send me your stuff when you're ready. Hasn't happened yet, but I'm always keeping an eye on them. But yes, essentially it would be the next work. You know what? I'm going to say things, and if it doesn't make sense, you tell me and I'll elaborate, okay? So as the agent, I can only help do the things that haven't been done yet, right? So if you've already published the book in English and it's available everywhere, well, that you did it. I can't get you to a language publisher. That part's done already. Whether it flopped or not, it's out there, right? So if it did fantastic, maybe you can look at, do people want to read it in French? Maybe, who knows? Or perhaps you have a next project. I'm saying you, as all of you writers, have a next project that is great. You said, I tried the self-publishing thing. I was great at it, but you know what? Don't want to be a publicist, my own publicist. I'd rather use that time to write. So sure, no problem. Let's find you a great publishing partner. And then it's not necessarily that different than being an unpublished writer at all, right? It's just you have prior credits. And again, I think it's just like having any other publication history. It's just in terms of, I think self-publishing doesn't hurt you. It just necessarily doesn't help you as much as you think, because the business models are a little bit different. And sometimes the audience that you built up with self-publishing doesn't always carry over.
Bing! That is very interesting.
So that's something one of my colleagues shared and pointed out as we were discussing this at the agency. And he made really brilliant points on something specific, but it's something to keep in mind. It's as if you're a great YA writer, and then your next book is an adult thriller, right?
Yeah.
It's not that the people don't love you. It's that they loved you for a different thing.
Yeah.
So now you may have to try to convince those people to come along with you to your adult thriller writing.
Yeah.
Or you may just have to go find adult thriller writers to convince to love you, right? So that's
a great point.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a great point. I was sharing with you just before we came on my own story.
Yes, let's get into it.
Which was, I had written my first book really, really quickly. And you're in love with it when you just think it's amazing, right? When you first wrote it. And I sent it out, sent it with the query letter to like the top agents in the United States. Like, I was out of my mind. And some of them were kind enough to actually, offer a gentle rejection letter. And then maybe a year or two later, I took a course with Curtis Brown on how to edit and pitch your novel. And there I learned that I did like everything in the book wrong. Like, it was atrocious what I did in my letter. I'm like ashamed of it. And
no, don't be. I honestly do not be.
No.
The reason I say don't be is you can't improve something that you never wrote, right? Yeah. So, like, honestly, when people tell me that they finished a draft, I say congratulations with all the joy in my heart, because it is so hard to get the words on the page.
Yes.
So your first draft, your first attempt of anything is going to suck. It's supposed to suck. You can't get better if you don't. Like, there's no other endeavor that you try where you expect to be great at it the first time out the gate. That's not how improvement works, right? So the only way to get good is to suck, learn how you sucked, try to suck less time next time.
Absolutely.
And repeat.
Absolutely. And I did get better. The course really helped me, and I did get eventually an agent. So yay.
Yay.
But I'm curious, because there is this, like, I would think like that, you burn those, kind of like the self-publishing, like my go-to is I burned the bridges. Like, so if I were still submitting, I would feel, could you ever go, I learned, and I would go back to the same people. Like, have you ever had anybody come back to you, work on themselves and come back, and are agents open to resubmissions, I guess?
So there are like two different questions smushed in there, so I'll answer both. So resubmissions, when I hear that, I think, are you sending me the same thing again? So sometimes, but the answer for me is only if I asked. So if you sent me, what was your project's name called? The title of your project? Do you mind sharing?
Oh, the first one, The Hill.
The Hill.
It's a
Okay.
terrible title.
You sent me The Hill and I read it and I said, oh, yikes. And so I would have sent you a polite form rejection. It's like, thank you so much. You're a wonderful person. Good luck on life. Goodbye. Don't send it to me again. It's just, logistically, because I have a tracker and it would tell me that you had sent me this thing again. And I would probably just kind of dismiss it. So, but if I read it and it'd be like, ooh, not quite, but there's something here, then the rejection would be more like, this is not for me at the time. I think it has potential. I would be happy to see your writing again in the future. Then it's fair game, right? So then you could send me the same project again and just say, hey, I made massive edits. I think it's a lot better. Here are some of the things I've changed, and send it again. And then it's up to me to decide whether I want to read it, right?
Yeah.
And then the other option is maybe you sent me The Hill. I go, ooh, yikes. And then a year or two later, you send me The Tree. The Tree is something new. I'm going to read it. Like, why not? Like, if The Tree appeals to me, that's a brand new work. So it's fair game. And I think that's for most agents where, they will give you the benefit of the doubt with something completely fresh and different. Whereas if they saw that if it's the same project, you might need to do a little bit more work to convince them that it's significantly different from the thing that they rejected for.
How important is the query letter for you to look at that manuscript? Like,
very important.
Yeah. Is it like, if the manuscript, if the query letter doesn't sell it, you're not even going to look?
Yeah. And it's not the query letter. I think of it like the cover letter of a job application. So the function of the query letter is to convince me to open the pages. So it's not to say it has to be amazing. Don't spend more time on the query letter than you're spending on the actual book. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is you want it to be an accurate reflection of your writing skill. So make sure it's as edited and polished as your book, right? Like if if the writing is poor in the query letter, I'm going to assume you wrote the query letter, you wrote the book. If you can't write in the query letter, I'm assuming you can't write in the book, right?
Yeah.
So make sure it's up to the standard of writing. Make sure it communicates what your book is about. Like, that sounds basic, but it's really important, right? Like, if you don't want to misrepresent your book or yourself because that's my only judgment. If you say, this is I can't even come up with an example. This is a book about a man who goes on a walk with his dog, right? And I was like, well, that's kind of boring. Never mind. And you don't tell me that on this walk, they, go through to another dimension and he learns about himself and saves the world. Like, you didn't tell me all of that. And so I missed the good part. And sometimes people hold back and I don't want to give you spoilers. This is not the part to say, oh, I'm holding back spoilers. I'm holding back the good bit. I don't want you to copy my excellent idea. Or I find writers spend a lot of time sometimes saying how desperately they want to be a writer, how long they've wanted to be a writer, how they've been a reader since they were a kid, how much they love me as an agent. That's great. Thank you. I appreciate it. And I was a lifelong reader too, but tell me about the book and why I should open these pages. And the reason for that is just simply volume, right? If for whatever if it doesn't capture my eye, the same with a movie trailer, right? Like, haven't you ever sat in a movie theater? Like, it's my favorite game to play and watch the preview and be like, oh, that's going to suck. That's going to suck. Ooh, that might be good. Let's write that one down. That's what the query letter is doing.
That's awesome.
And so usually what I triage is I'm going through my queries, and the first thing I do is I only read the query letters, and the ones that it doesn't interest me based on the premise, I reject just based on the query letter.
Mm-hmm.
Because even if the writing is great, the premise is not for me, right? Like if you tell me this is about, Jack the Ripper and, how he became Jack the Ripper, I was like, no, thank you. No, merci. That's probably a fantastic story that I will never read.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
and that's important too, right? Like you want it to accurately portray your story, yourself, and your skill set so that the people who are really interested in that will be like, ooh, that's perfect for me. And the people who are really not interested in that don't even waste their time.
Yeah. And how important is, we hear all the time, like, writers get to do more of their own marketing. They're more, like they get to be promoting themselves in their book. Like how important is it that they have this and that Twitter following or Instagram, or how active they are on any of these platforms? Because sometimes I'm like, just personally, I'm like, okay, I get to keep working on this. And then sometimes I'm like, somebody just had a breakaway book and they've got nothing on Instagram and it blows up. So I'm like, well, maybe you just wait for it. Like, you know what I mean? I'm kind of like,
there are different goals and different questions. If your question is how important is your social media following in getting an agent, then that is more, it depends on fiction or nonfiction. Nonfiction, it's kind of important. The reason for that is in nonfiction, you're not only pitching the topic and the idea, you're also pitching why people want to hear it from you, right? Like the idea with nonfiction is like, these are facts. Anybody could write about these facts. Why should you be the one to write about these facts, and why will people listen to you? So in that case, yes, it doesn't necessarily have to be social media. It can be, I have a PhD in this. People will listen to me. Or I have a newsletter that has this many clicks or this many subscribers. People listen to me. Or podcasts with whatever platform, right? So platform or expertise.
Yeah.
If it's fiction, that's not going to necessarily it's not going to help get you an agent, right? It's not going to help you get you an agent, because if you're funny on Twitter and you have lots of followers, that doesn't mean people want to read your literary fiction. It just means they love your cat memes, right? So, and it doesn't even mean you write good literary fiction. It means you find really funny cat memes. So it doesn't translate in the same way.
Right.
So for fiction writers, my advice in terms of whether or not including that platform information in their pitch, I don't think it's that important. It doesn't hurt. If you have a bajillion followers, cool, include it. Wonderful. If you have none, don't mention it. You don't have to. It's not going to hurt you either way. The writing is key for fiction. The writing, and then I get into like work ethic and style and vibe and things like that when we're actually talking. But remember, the query letter is just trying to get me to read the pages. Telling me you have a bunch of Twitter followers doesn't tell me that I should read your book. Whereas if you are, for example, somebody, I've been following a lot of people in the gentle parenting space. Like some of them are mothers, some of them are parents, some of them are psychologists, and they are talking about how to raise kids in a more less spanking, more talking kind of way. And I'm like, this is really interesting. So for that, if you tell me I'm a clinical psychologist who's been working with children for 15 years, yes, that does convince me to open your pages more than I'm a mom, I have 2 kids, and I love posting their pictures on Instagram, and me and my family members. Like, It's like,
Yeah.
that's wonderful. That's sweet. I think that you're a great mom.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you necessarily are the person people should turn to for advice. Does that make sense, that distinction?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how you kind of started to touch on the other things that you're considering. Like, I didn't think that you're already thinking about that. Like, how are we going to work together? And you mentioned work ethic and things like that, which I find really interesting because I haven't seen a lot of stuff on that. And I'm curious, like, what is your relationship, like, or what is the agent-writer relationship like?
Ooh, great question. This varies for everybody. And I think during our pre-chat, you said, should I be interviewing my agent? And I was like, yes. So this is what happens at the call, right? So presumably, and I think this is why you don't hear a lot about it, because it happens after the query letter has passed muster, after the pages has passed muster.
Right.
The assumption is you get a call and they say, I want to represent you. And then you say yes, and then everything's great. But that's not, at least in my experience, the call is more like, I want to get to know you and see if we can make this happen. And then you want to get to know me to see if I'm actually the right person.
Yeah.
Because if like your relationship with your agent can potentially be a long one, and it would be really problematic, or if you didn't like working with them, right? Because this is a person who, let's say, even if you only work with them on one book, if that book sells and it takes about 18 months to get from your computer to the bookshelf, you're working with them for at least 18 months. And then if that book sells well, you're now working with them for like the whole time that royalties are coming in, right? So that's for one book, presumably. Yeah. Let's say you're an author who wants to write multiple books. Let's say you want to make this your whole career. Let's say you want to make a living of just being a writer. This agent might be working with you for a long time and pretty closely in a professional capacity.
Yes.
So I think it's important to really know yourself as a writer and know what your needs are. Like, what kind of career are you trying to build? Like, when I said make a living off your writing, did that excite you? Or like, okay, no, that's actually not what I want. I really love my day job and I want to stay with that, which is completely legit, right? If somebody says, oh, I want you to travel the world, does that excite you? Or is that not what you want, right? Like, you have to have a clear idea of what you want. And it's so funny. I love asking rooms of writers of, what is your goal? And they're like, I want what everybody wants. And then they spout something very specific to them as an individual. And so I asked the person next to them, like, well, I also want what everybody wants, which is something completely different.
Amazing.
So knowing what you want and need is really important in helping you find the agent who can help you reach those goals. Yeah. And so what I've learned is I know what kind of writer I am best suited to help because of the types of things that fire me up. For example, I like commercial stuff. I'm a popcorn reader. Like I like beach reads. I like books that make you crack up laughing. I like the kind of stuff that you read with like a cocktail in your hand and a big sun hat on. That is my jam, right? And I want to sell lots of copies. It's not that all agents don't want to sell lots of copies, but for me, when a writer says, if my book can just touch one person's heart, that will be enough for me. It's not enough for me. And that person is completely valid. And I actually know colleagues who would love that writer, but it's not me, because I'm like, what am I doing if we're only working for that one person? Just print it out and hand it to them then. I'm like, I want us to be on Oprah. Others might find that to be unrealistic, or somebody who's like has too, not necessarily too, or like who's like sometimes, it feels like, oh, why do you want to be on Oprah? That's not realistic for you. But I'm like, I want to be on Oprah. Like let's go there, right? But I also want a writer who's kind of a hustler, right?
Yeah.
So somebody who's like, okay, that didn't work. What else are we going to try?
Love that. Yeah.
And not everybody has that personality, and not everybody needs to have that personality, because again, other agents are different than me. So the key is finding the agent who is a good fit.
Yeah.
I do not, like, for example, I don't give out my number. You don't call me and don't text me. Send me an email and we'll schedule a time.
Well, that's what I'm interested to hear too. Like, what do agents do? Like, what can the writer, in terms of when they're thinking about what do I need, what do I want, what can even be their expectations? Because like, is it just, getting the book deal? But if you're saying it's like, it's an 18-month, it could be a 2-year, it's a 3-year, what is the agent doing all along?
Great questions. Again, I will talk about myself, but essentially your agent is helping you shepherd this book from your computer to publication, and making sure that you are comfortable all along the way, that things are going smoothly, troubleshooting any problems. But an agent can also, if that is the relationship you want, really help you guide your career, right? So let's say you are a person who does want writing to be their full-time job, right? And so we talk about, okay, what maybe we do talk about your social media platform. What do we need to do to, maybe you were writing nonfiction and the book is brilliant, but your social media is not up to snuff yet. What can we do to talk? It's not that I'm going to do it for you, but I'm certainly going to talk you through it. Do we need to hire somebody? Do we need to take a class on Instagram? I don't know. I think that's a thing. I'm not sure. But oh, there you go. Take Kat's class, right? So or maybe it's figuring out other avenues. It's like, are you a person who likes to do school visits? For kids writers, school visits are a really big part of not only how they get their income and how they do publicity, but another way to keep that book alive. And is that something that you want? How do we build your website? How, like, all of these things. And then the best writers, many writers, are like full of stories all the time. And so it's like, great, you have 10 books on the go. Let's prioritize. Let's sit together.
Yeah. So you guys do that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because it's fun when my clients are like, so I know I was supposed to be writing this, but I actually am writing this instead. Of like, cool, no problem. And it's actually fine, because I don't like to rush the creative process. I believe it's sacred. I say the creativity comes when it comes, until you're on deadline. Then we need to pick up the pace, right? So sometimes I like to do check-ins. It's like, hey, your deadline's coming up in 2 weeks. So are you good? Or do I need to like cover for you? Like, so what are we doing here, right? So check-ins like that. And then really figuring out, okay, you maybe you were YA and now you want to write adult thriller. So we figure out that transition. Do you want to write it under a pen name? Do you want to keep your name? Like, what are we doing here?
We're gonna have to do another interview.
I
want to talk about pen names, but not today. But I want to talk about pen names.
Right. But essentially, what I'm saying is, your agent, in an ideal wonderland where your agent could be your business partner in building your writing career, right? So that is, I think, is why it's important for the writer to interview the agent and say, is this a person who I trust? Do I think that their goals are aligned with mine? Do I think their values are aligned with mine? And do I trust their expertise, that they will always be pointing me in the right direction, because you never want to be in a business partnership with someone and then constantly be micromanaging them or checking up on their work, being like, oh, I don't know if that thing that they told me was right. Let me go check. Like think about it. If you were going to go into business with somebody, you wouldn't if you felt like you constantly had to go call people and say, do you think what they're saying is legit?
Yeah.
You would say, you know what, let's not.
Yeah.
And I think that's important to remember, because that's exactly what it is. It's a business partnership. I don't like the marriage comparison, because it's not that. They're not your spouse. They're also not your therapist. I don't like that comparison either. But it is a business partnership where both parties are committed and working hard for a common goal.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. And I just, it was a revelation that people would even interview the agent. You know what I mean? Like, we're just so, excited and hungry for it. And that there would be questions or things that they could ask to ensure that they get the best possible match. Right. So yeah, that's awesome. Back to query letters.
Yes. I'm sorry.
Oh, no. What are some do's don'ts for people on the query letter front?
Yeah.
For you, like, what's that?
Yeah.
I mean, you did kind of mention some, like, make sure there's good writing, make sure it talks about your book. But is there like anything where you're just like, oh, no, another one of those guys?
Yeah, I think a big don't is don't bash. Like, just don't put things down, because that actually doesn't make you look better.
Yeah.
So, and I've had to learn that lesson in general of just like how I speak about other things, right? Like it doesn't, like, I remember this happens in YA and romance, which both areas I represent, but it can happen in all sorts of genres, right? Like, don't say, oh, this genre is so terrible and so full of problems, and I've finally written the book that will fix all of those problems. Well, I don't know. Now you've got me my backup. It's like, first of all, Mr. Sir, I don't like your tone. And do you really think you're going to fix it? I'll be the judge of that. Like, right? Like, it's already adversarial, right? And you've now created a bar that you have to clear.
Yeah.
So don't bash other things. Don't say my book will be like X if X was good, or just don't do that. It's not necessary. It's better to point out things you admire and then things that you don't.
Speaking of which, I was just thinking about comps. I was listening to a podcast the other day about, comparison text, like using that to hook the agent. It's like this and like that. And can you dig yourself into a hole by doing that? Because then the agent expects, this or that. And, it can be recommended to help them.
Yeah, I think again, it depends. Comps are important. Because comps are important to situate your book, like to give it context. And I think the best way to come up with comp titles is
listen up, everybody, listen up.
Yes. If it's permitted in your area, wherever you're watching this, to go to a bookstore or a library, safely, don't touch anything, put your mask on, go to a bookstore or a library, and go to the section where you think your book should be.
That's great.
And look at the books there. Bookstores are ideal. Library works too. But libraries in alphabetical order usually. So you kind of want to go to the bookstore because they're ordered mostly by genre and stuff like that. So go to the area where you think your book should be and look at the books there. And then picture the person who's buying your book. Like, create a little book stack for them. It's like, okay, they're buying this book, they're buying this book, they're buying my book, and they're buying this book. So what is the stack of books that reader has?
That's great.
Because I think
that's really great.
best comp. And the reason I say go now is because the bookstore has the books that are selling right now, not the books from your childhood that you loved growing up. It's great. Anne of Green Gables is not a comp for your book. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Harry Potter is now over 20 years old. I'm so sorry.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
So sorry. So just, go and see what's on the shelves now and what it compares to. So that's an important comp. And I see your point about it could dig a hole. Yes. So there was a comment on that another agent, a brilliant agent, made a comment saying that, hey, we shouldn't have to tell you this, but it's still happening. So don't comp your book to Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter. And people were like, but why? And it's a valid question because they're like, but it is.
Yeah.
And here are the reasons why. When there are two main reasons, right? And I break it down into what comps are. Again, rein me in if I'm going in too deep, okay? Yeah. So there are two types of comps. There are editorial comps and sales comps. An editorial comp is the comparison about the book's contents, like the themes. Yeah. So my book is like this book's in terms of their character. My book is like this book in terms of tone. My book is like this book in terms of the themes. Yes. That's an editorial comp, right? Yeah. The sales and comps are more like my book will sell to a similar audience as this other book. Okay? Yes. So I like those because those are the ones that say there is sales potential in my book, and because I'm a salesperson. So I'm always leaning towards those. And that's kind of the type of comp you get when you do the bookstore trick. Following me so far?
Yeah, that's spicy.
Okay. So then let's say you've now said your book is like Harry Potter. So you've said your book is like Harry Potter. The person's reading, they're like, okay, is it like Harry Potter because magic? Because they're wizards? Because there's 3 friends? Like Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings and now even Twilight and 50 Shades were so big and so influential that some of their distinct elements are now just tropes of the genre.
Right.
Do you see what I mean? So Kat, I don't even know what you write. So I asked throw these things out and then
I'm still figuring it out.
Give me a hint so I can use references that are relevant.
Kind of rom-com-y dramedy.
Okay, great.
And the next one's psychological thriller. So I'm going to need some coaching.
Your agent can help you with that. I remember in YA, there was this whole moment where the girl has to enter the competition to get this guy, right? And when it was first done, it was fresh and new and interesting. And then by the 10th one, it's like, okay, this is like a trope, right? Yes, so now they have to be sorted into different factions. I guess you can say it was fresh and new when Harry Potter did it, but now it's very common. So if you tell me that your book is like Harry Potter because there's magic and it's at a school and people have to be sorted into different factions, what that tells me is you haven't been reading in your genre.
Wow.
Because there are many more contemporary books that are still doing that.
Yeah.
So there's more recent books you could have compared yourself to.
Right.
Okay. So that's on the editorial side.
Yeah.
So maybe you said it's like Harry Potter because you think it's gonna sell like Harry Potter. Did you remember that Harry Potter was part of the opening ceremonies at the Olympics? Do you think your book is going to be at the opening ceremonies of an Olympics because it will be that much of a cultural reset?
Yeah.
And here's the thing. If you're saying the audience that read Harry Potter that bought Harry Potter will also buy my book, is that enough for me to know who that audience is? Because that was literally everybody in 1997. right? So now, like, I don't know how
Yeah.
to target my marketing or my
Yeah.
sales. Like, I don't know how to pitch that person, because if I say this is for Harry Potter, like
Yeah.
everyone, right? So it's not
Yes.
useful. It's not doing the thing you want it to do. It's not telling me more about your book. It's
Yeah.
not telling me that you understand your industry. It's not
Yeah.
helping me target the correct reader for your book. So that's why it's not useful.
That is awesome. There was so many golden nuggets in there. Thank you.
You're
And
welcome.
which begs the question, what are you looking for? Yeah, what comps or what genre? Well, you said YA, but I'm sure like people who are listening or watching definitely want to hear more about you.
Oh, for sure. So I represent commercial and genre fiction for children and adults by writers of color. So what that means is I like fun, escapist, um, popcorn, like blow stuff up. I just like big emotions. Like, of course, everything has to be well written because we're writers and we care about our craft. Not we, you all, not me. I'm not a writer. But you are writers and you care about your craft. But I love the Cheese Fest. I'm currently watching Never Have I Ever on Netflix. And it's about this girl, Davy, who is a disaster and makes all the wrong choices. And I'm just like, oh, you precious child.
Oh, we'll have to check that one out.
It's so good. It's that's what kind of stuff I would love to see in YA. I loved Crazy Rich Asians. I love Shonda Rhimes' work. I just like very over the top.
Yeah.
I'm currently close to submissions and will probably be closed for the rest of the year. But my next round, where I'm trying to grow my list for the next round, will probably be in the romance, rom-com, women's fiction area. I love a good family saga. Pachinko is a fantastic book that like sweeps over decades and generations about this one family in Korea and Japan, and it is just beautiful. And I'm a sucker for their family sucks, and here's how they deal with it. It's like, well, great. I want to know all about it.
I'm gonna write that down.
Yeah, Pachinko is fantastic. I'm thinking of Ghana Must Go by Thais. Let me Google it on my computer right here.
Yeah, I'm gonna write down Pachinko.
I remember that book, Tai Selassie. I got that right. That book, the writing was so lush and beautiful that I called my friend to read her a paragraph. I was like, you have to hear this. But it was also about a family that was messed up. They had like they did the classic, the patriarch is dead, then we're forced to interact with each other. And here's the drama that comes out of it. So yeah. I love that. The Turnout House by Angela Flournoy. It's the matriarch is dead, but they have to figure out what to do with this house, and they're trying to figure out should they keep it in the family, and it kind of follows each of the family members of like why they want to keep it or why they want to sell. And
that's great.
It's nice just so well done. Yeah. So that's as close to literary as I get. I say that I have like Oprah and Reese Witherspoon's taste of literary fiction.
Perfect.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's good company, right? Not totally. Obama's a little highbrow for me. He likes fancy stuff. I'm a little bit more accessible.
No, I love it. I love it. Oh my God. I'm going to have to bring you back because I'm sure I could do another hour with you. This was so awesome. Thank you so much for sharing today and just like sharing all your insight and behind the scenes knowledge. And thank you all for watching. And yeah, we'll see you soon. I'm like, my brain is going now.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure. This was fun. I remember I asked you, I said, do we have structure? Is this going to be a fun conversation? We had a fun conversation.
It was great, Léonicka. Thank you so much. So great to spend time with you today. Hang tight. I'll be right with you. And as for the rest of you, love you. So great to see you. And this will be on the website and there's more to come. So I'll see you guys soon. Cheers.